Welcome to the PARN webinar on the Professional Body Sector Review for 2015. This is the second of the webinars that we've started to do, and we will be doing several more, as I'll tell you a bit later. Let me first begin by just telling you a little bit about PARN, and then I'll get on to describing the contents of the Professional Body Sector Review for 2015. So PARN has been going for quite some time now, was established 17 years ago, and it's a non-profit membership organization for professional bodies. That includes learned societies and regulatory bodies, as well as professional associations. We've got over 125 members, mostly in the UK, but also we have some in Canada, Australia, Ireland, South Africa and Malaysia, representing a very, very large number of people. PARN is a center of knowledge on pretty much any subject that would be of interest to those who are running professional bodies. We do work on strategy, on governance, CPD, standards, finance, and many of those subjects are actually covered in the Professional Body Sector Review for 2015. Which I will describe. In addition to publishing books like the Sector Review, we carry out events, we do research, and we do consultancy work in the area. Right, well, let's look at the Sector Review. The first thing to notice is that it's the review for 2015. It's the third of these reviews that we carried out, and in fact at the moment I'm working on 2016 Professional Body Sector Review. What's particularly interesting about the 2015 review is that it has an overall theme. The first two were generally a kind of omnibus of issues, best practice, sector news, those sorts of things. We still have those categories, but there is an overall theme for 2015, which is 50 years of change in the professional body sector. It happened that I recently looked at a book that had been written by a colleague of mine at Bristol University on the professional body sector, which was written back in 1964. And I have to say I was very much struck by how different the sector is today compared with 50 years ago. And so that's the overall theme of the sector review for 2015. And I divided those changes into three categories. First of all, there is internal changes, then there's changes to relations with members, and then there's changes to relations with other stakeholders. So this diagram gives you an idea of some of the major changes. And if you just look at the top there, you can see that in the old days, 50 years ago and earlier, the top paid salaried staff member was generally called the General Secretary, or may have even just been called Office Manager, whereas now the title is CEO, and they are expected to have a degree of competency in running a professional body. No longer is it a requirement that they should be coming from the sector, the profession itself. And also a much higher proportion are women now. In fact, the professional body sector is markedly high in its proportion of women CEOs, about a third. But let's go on to look more at the contents. And as I've said, there's those three areas of major change: internal relations, relations to members, and relations to stakeholders. Now, the internal relations, one of the most striking changes that have occurred is in terms of the governance of professional bodies. If you have a look at that table, if you look down the 2006 column, you'll see that the most common form of governance was a single council It's tended to be a representative council of those members who were active in branches and special interest groups. It may be that they came to the council through a general election open to all. And that was the traditional means of governing a professional body from really the last several centuries. More recently, the single council has been supplemented by a smaller group. These councils tended to be very, very large, 40, 50 people, some over 100, and they only met maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. So they needed a smaller group to help develop their agenda and also to carry out work in between meetings. And so that was the second most popular means in 2006 of governing professional bodies. And you can see together they represented 78% of all the professional bodies that were in this survey and that answered the questions for all 3 of the times that we sent out the survey. Now, the really huge change has been towards the smaller sort of group, an executive board being a governing body. Some have switched straight from a council to a single executive board, and you can see the proportion that have an executive board has risen enormously from 10% to 38%. And the other model, the one that we actually favor in part, is a dual structure where the smaller executive board is the governing body and the larger council is a support body. And that's risen from 13% to 28%. So you can see that the traditional models, which had been 78% in 2006, now represent only 35%. A really tremendous change that we've tracked over the years. There are many other internal changes that we discuss, particularly in terms of the way that leadership is formulated. And the Professional Body Sector Review has 4 interviews with CEOs of professional bodies, and all 4 of those just happen to be women. The second area, right, well, I'd like to ask you a question on that change in governance. And that is, can you let us know if you've recently changed your governance structure or if you're planning on changing it? And I'll give you a few seconds to type in your answers. If you could do that, please, for me. Okay, well, I've noticed that a few people have given us a response to these questions. It seems that some have fairly recently, in 2013, made a change and are currently reviewing it. The other thing is that some have mentioned that they've simplified their governance structure. So that's very interesting information. If you would like to provide us with any more information, you can do so by contacting Parn at info@parngoogle.com after this webinar. Okay, well, let's go on now to the second topic, which is the major change in relations with members. The really, really big change in relations with members has been the coming of CPD. And you can see from that graph that 50 years ago there was no such thing as CPD. That didn't mean that members didn't keep up to date, but professional bodies didn't have a system for recording and therefore assuring that their members did carry out CPD. So you can also see that the growth of CPD policies has continued until very recently. I would say that the 88% that have a CPD policy in 2012 is pretty close to saturation point. Those that don't are either very new and are about to have a CPD policy, or they follow a policy of another body, very often a professional association with a related regulatory body may follow the CPD policy of the regulatory body. CPD itself is developing and changing, and for many professional bodies, it's more than just keeping up to date. It's also providing a way of professionals developing their careers in an adaptable manner, taking up opportunities as they arise. And this has been described very well in a book that we published at PARN on adaptability by Hilary Lindsay, who's the president of the Institute for Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. And the article, which helps to explain this lovely looking diagram, is in the central review for you to have a look at. The third area is relations to other stakeholders. Here we notice a number of rather different trends. One trend is the rise in transparency, particularly regarding complaints of discipline. I would say that in the distant past, professional bodies were reluctant to allow the external stakeholders to know what was going on in terms of individuals who were misbehaving. Nowadays, it's much, much more common to let the general public know who is being disciplined, what the sanctions imposed are, and for some, also the rationale behind the decision to discipline. This is reasonably new and is part of an overall general trend towards greater transparency in all processes among professional bodies. The other trend in relation to external stakeholders is in terms of income sources. Traditionally, professional bodies had the vast majority of their income from member subscriptions. This has been changing. Nowadays, only about 45 to 50% on average of income comes from member subscriptions. More and more is coming from members through charging for specific services. But the most interesting change has been a rise in proportion of income from non-member sources, selling publications through Smiths, for example, and also developing products that the professional body sells, and particularly products aimed at employers. And the sector review has a number of examples of this, and I just want to show you one of them. And that was the kite mark that the Market Research Society has developed, which employing organizations or any organization applies to, and as long as they follow the 10 fair data principles that are listed in that slide, then the Market Research Society will confer their mark. This is a very interesting new development. It's a way of earning money, but it's also a way of raising the profile of the professional body amongst the wider general public. So we would like to know if you've recently developed any non-member sources of income, and if you have, if you could briefly describe them. I'll give you a few seconds for that. Well, I noticed that somebody has said they get 40% of their income from publication sales. I have to say that's very high. By and large, as I said, 45 to 50% from subscriptions, maybe another 15 to 25% from education on average, and then the rest from many other things, some of which would be publications. So on average, that 40% is much higher than the average of maybe 10 or 15% of other professional bodies. So well done. Somebody has said they have a separate trading arm to make a profit from advertising job vacancies. However, that's declined with the rise of online competitors. That's a very interesting thing. We have found in the financial benchmarking exercises we've carried out over the last 5 years that income from advertising as well as from sponsorships had declined quite seriously around 2008, 9, 10, but that is beginning to come back again, which is very interesting. And we'd obviously also like to hear from your experiences of that trend. Well, we're coming pretty much to the end now. I urge you to have a look at the sector review. It's available online at the address listed there. We still have a number of hard copies available, and we are giving them for free, which you can order from the parnglobal.com /publications /EBSR. And for any further information about PARN or about the sector reviews, particularly about next year's sector review, where we'll be looking at the future for professional bodies, do contact us on info@parnglobal.com. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is the second of a series of webinars. We will be having another one on the 3rd of December on social media. This will be based on a major research project which we've undertaken during this year on social media. And then on the 21st of January, there'll be the latest edition of our financial benchmarking report. I've already given you some information from previous financial benchmarking reports. It's a very, very useful publication where we gather together the annual reports of all professional bodies each year. We have other events coming up. We have our 3 special interest groups, one on communications, one on finance, and one on regulation. And those are the topics that we will be discussing at the next meeting of each. Each of these meetings takes place in early June. And then also our major conference. We run 2 major conferences every year. And the next one is on social media. And there is a special discount if you book early to that conference. We, of course, do research, and we have one major new research project which we will be undertaking during the coming year. This is on continuing professional development. Lots of different issues will be investigated in this research project. We will be looking at whether it should be compulsory or not, and whether professional bodies should move to output-based measures, but we'll also look at many other issues like accreditation methods and the difficulties of auditing CPD records, and doing things like how do you measure reflection, how do you measure the quality of reflection. We already have 2 professional bodies who signed up to support this research project, and we are looking for more. Please let us know if you're interested. We'll send you more detail about this research project. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for attending, and I look forward to you attending our next webinar. Thank you.